Anna Glowinski on TRE in the afternoon.
So even if you have been living under a rock for the last several decades, you will have heard of the Queen. She was so famous. She is so much more famous than pretty much any other famous person that came during her reign. And somebody to talk about her fame, her personality, the impact that she had on the world around her and on the world of celebrity around her as well is Craig Brown, well-renowned journalist and author. So your book is called A Voyage Around the Queen. What inspired you to write? I mean, you don't pick on sort of wilting flowers as your subjects, do you? You really go in for the big topics.
I like kind of panoramic figures who symbolise lots of different things to lots of different people. And then it's as much about the way people react to them as it is about the person themselves. And you're right when you, in the introduction, you said that the Queen was famous. I mean, I think, obviously she was famous, but I argue in the book she was the most famous person for longer than anyone who'd ever lived, because if you think she was famous from the moment of her birth, that was headline news. And then she lived for 96 years famous. Yeah. And so that beats everyone who's Julius Caesar or someone, or, Chairman Mao or Hitler. Right? They were all famous, all the Beatles, they were famous for 10 years or that. But she was famous for 96 years.
Yeah, you definitely can't argue with that. I guess it will come down to her legacy then, whether she still gets talked about as much as Julius Caesar in 2,000 years to come. What do you reckon?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Julius Caesar isn't talked about a great deal these days. I'd say she might be on a level with Julius Caesar, or maybe. I mean, fame is so mysterious that sometimes it disappears. But I think everyone was surprised, even anti-monarchists were surprised about the level of emotion and kind of deep emotion. I think deeper than it was really with Princess Diana at her funeral and when she died. Because you'd have had to have been about 103 or something to remember a time when she wasn't alive. So basically she was part of everyone's mental furniture. And I think that, so whether you liked her or disliked her or approved of monarchy or disapproved, she was just part of your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the money that you held in your hands, you couldn't remember a time where it didn't have her face on it. She was literally woven into the fabric of our lives.
And that's also one of the things I explore in the book, the people's reaction to meeting her and how bizarre it was. I mean, I met her once, and it was a very bizarre experience because you're so used to this image of her. You see it virtually every day, or while she was alive, you see it. You saw it just about every day of your life on a coin or on a paper or magazine or on the television. It was sort of unavoidable on stamps, and so people, even quite robust people, were completely terrified before meeting her. I had a friend who was an editor who went to one of her. She used to have lunches sort of once every couple of months for sort of big wig figures, just 12 people at Buckingham Palace, quite sort of intimate lunches. But he was told and this was about 10 years ago, he was advised by one of the courtiers. He said it might be worth spending a penny, sir, before you go in. And this friend of mine, Alexander Chancellor, said, oh, no, it's all right, I don't need to. He said, nevertheless, it might be worth going, because some people have had accidents on meeting the Queen. And these were serious, captains of industry. Wow. And I have a number of stories like that in my book, or otherwise of people talking gibberish, of people, because one of the things, you couldn't ask the Queen questions. That was sort of not allowed. So she would do the asking of the questions, and then people would just get so nervous they would just talk rubbish. Or like I have a story in the book of Phil Collins and Terry Wogan being at a Buckingham Palace party for the arts, and the Queen came over and chatted for a bit. And then Phil Collins started whistling the theme tune from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, just as the Queen was leaving. And the Queen looked back and said, "Oh, what's that?" And Phil Collins apologized. And then Phil Collins said to Terry Wogan, "What was I thinking of? Suddenly starting whistling this theme tune." And Terry Wogan, who'd been to the palace a number of times, said it's the royal effect. Everyone does something mad when they meet the Queen, and they live to regret it for the rest of their lives.
What about you? Did you manage to hold it together? Also, I love the way that you just casually mentioned, did you just write this book to be so you could have interviews, so you could be by the way, I met the Queen?
No, because it's not, in some ways, it's not such a grand claim, because, David Cameron, after she died, when he was making a speech about her in the House of Commons, he thought she must have, I think it's almost inarguable, that she met more people than anyone else who'd ever lived, even a ticket collector or something, because her job was meeting people, and she met them from the age, probably the age of 10, she was being introduced to people. And so David Cameron, I think he reckoned she had spoken to either 3 or 4 million people in her life.
Wow.
And that's so not just waving or smiling at them, but actually speaking to them. And so for me to be one of the 3, I'm glad I was one of the 3 or 4 million, but it's not such a bold statement. But I was kind of relatively young. Well, I was young. I was about 19, 18 or 19. I think I was a student. Yeah. Yes, I was completely overwhelmed by just this face. And I was studying drama at the time. And the host who introduced her, I wasn't expecting to meet her. He said, "Oh, Craig's studying drama." And she said, "Oh, that's very interesting," which is her normal response to things. But I took her, I really believed she was interested. And so I started talking the whole way through the syllabus. I was talking about Bertolt Brecht, this boring East German dramatist, and his theories of dislocation. And she kept saying, "Oh, that's very interesting." And then she used to do this thing of taking a step back when she wanted to conclude a conversation. But I started taking steps forward, thinking. and so I, like Terry Wogan suggested, I remember waking up each night in the middle of the night for the next fortnight, thinking, what was I talking? What was I doing? And so there's a strong argument that she thought everyone was slightly mad. Everyone she met was slightly mad.
Just where are all the normal people?
Yeah.
But you said that you like picking figures that mean different things to different people. And you're saying that she's, even if you're a pessimist, she comes across as a pessimist. If you're an optimist, she comes across as an optimist. What is it about her that you think enabled her to be a chameleon to so many different people? Or is it just that she was a symbol rather than real?
Chameleons, I'm not a great biologist, but I think chameleons change their colours all the time. In a funny way, people change their colours to suit her. She remained the same. Almost, she's a funny person to do a biography of, because most biographies are about people developing and their characters changing according to events. But actually, her character remained set. If you read her governess's book about them, when she was 6, from the age of 6 to 96, her character remained pretty solidly the same. Wow. No surprises to her. And I can't remember what your question was. Of people changing, yes.
How she represents different things to different people.
Yes, and so I think in a way she was a kind of blank canvas, because she never gave interviews or anything. And as I was saying, she only asked questions in conversations or in conversations with strangers. So you never got much impression of her inner life. And she remained, even though she was so famous, she remained very private. And so therefore people could project onto her whatever they thought. So if they were anti-monarchist, they'd say, "Oh, she looked at me rather meanly," or something like that. Yeah. John Prescott, the deputy prime minister under Tony Blair, when he first became a Labour MP in 1970, he was an MP for Hull, and he was an avowed anti-monarchist. I think he changed it, like so many people did as the years went by. But then he was anti-monarchist, and he had this fear that the press would take a photograph of him bowing to the Queen when she was visiting Hull. And in his autobiography, written only, 10 years ago, he said, but the Queen tricked me. She spoke quietly, and so I had to lean down to hear what she was saying. But of course the Queen was very small anyway. But of course the Queen wouldn't have tried to trick John Prescott. But that was just a way of that's what he thought,
Yeah.
And so people would invest her with their own ideas.
And so what other sorts of stories are you telling in this book? Is it, it sounds like it's not just a straight through chronology of her life. It sounds like telling sort of stories, meeting people.
Yes, it doesn't, it follows roughly chronological lines, but I don't, and there are so many books about the Queen and about her reign, though I think mine was the first sort of after her death. I was writing it. I was researching it or started writing it when she died. But it's not, I basically my way of doing books is to not put in the boring stuff. And so other royal books about the Queen have long descriptions of her tours of Canada or Australia and the Lord Mayors she meets and what she was wearing. And I don't put any of that in. I just go on to things which seem to indicate something interesting about her or about people's reactions to her. And I like going very off track. So, there are, for instance, there's a picture of Jimi Hendrix in the book because he played at the Isle of Wight Festival in, I think, 1970. He played the national anthem on his electric guitar, and I like, or comedians meeting the Queen, or the way the Queen spoke, and so I have. There are lots and lots of little chapters, all I think trying to reflect a different kind of light on her. So it's a bit like a mosaic or a jigsaw puzzle.
And you do like you say, you're looking for these more interesting sort of human element stories. And I think, you're known for having a bit of humour in your writing and the things that you do. How do you sort of match that with respect or did you have respect? It sounds to me like you do.
I try and do each chapter according to, the tone changes in each chapter because obviously some parts of the monarchy I find comical, the pomposity, or even the way people react, or even the way I reacted. It's obviously comical, but then there are other. Early on, there's this odd thing. I'm interested always in people's contemporaries, and one of the Queen's contemporaries was Anne Frank. Who, as everyone knows, was killed by the Nazis. And Anne Frank had photographs. When she was hiding in the annex in Amsterdam, she had photographs on the wall of Princess Margaret and Princess Elizabeth, who were then about sort of 8 and 10, I can't remember. And they were sort of symbols of hope to Anne Frank. And Anne Frank wrote in her diaries, she speculated on who the Queen might marry. And this just showed, you just have to take that with due solemnity because it was a heartfelt thing of Anne Frank. And it just showed how the Queen was a symbol, during the war, but also after the war, a symbol of hope for a lot of people, even though for other people she might have been a symbol of the terrible class structure or that kind of thing. And then later on, relatively recently, the Queen went to, I think it was Belsen, where Anne Frank died, this awful death. And the Queen bowed at her, at the memorial to her, which is the first time the Queen had bowed to someone. And so obviously with that kind of chapter, it's proper seriousness. But there are lots of other chapters which I play for laughs. People have said to me, quite a few people have said to me that in the long chapter about her death and the aftermath, they got quite tearful. But then also in the aftermath of her death, I don't know if you remember, but lots of people were using it to sort of get time off work, things like that. Or one supermarket, I think in Norwich, switched off the bleepers at its checkout tills as a sign of respect. These absurd things were done as signs of respect. And so, I like mixing funny things with sad things. And so I think that's a good example, that chapter, where there are funny and sad things going on all the time.
And how do you think she managed to remain such a sort of neutral character throughout her whole life? You said she pretty much didn't change from when she was 6 years old. I mean, history's full of monarchs who just go off the rails and do like crazy things.
And also members of her family, as we all know, got off the rails. Yeah. During her life, it's she's romanticized now, I think probably quite rightly. But during her life, the biggest regular criticism of her was she was so boring. But actually, it now seems, quite an achievement to remain boring, to remain sort of dependable, to remain sort of private. So dependable. She hardly made a mistake in those 96 years. You think how many politicians make mistakes every week, or maladies or anything. And so I think that was her great achievement, really, of just remaining the same and also I think she didn't make the mistake which members of her family have done, virtually all of the younger generation, except maybe Princess Anne, of mistaking a sort of her fame for some kind of, and even her popularity for some kind of personal attribute within her. She was able to divide herself from the adulation she received. Yeah. And I think that was what kept her sane. And maybe it's what kept her boring as well. But you don't want really interesting people as monarchs. You want dependable people in the 21st century, I think.
Oh, it does. I mean, I touched on this right at the very beginning, but it does, beg the question again about the legacy she's left behind. I mean, your book, and congratulations, by the way, it's a bestseller. So there's obviously still a huge appetite for hearing about her. But as she was sort of so boring, do you think people will still continue to talk about her in generations to come? I mean, we talk about Henry VIII for the worst reasons.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think Henry VIII, everyone knows, and they don't know the other Henrys, really.
No.
I couldn't give you any detail about any of the other Henrys. We know him because he killed 3 of his wives, or however many it was. And that guarantees his infamy and his fame. And the Queen, I suppose, she'll be famous as part of a kind of backdrop because her life sort of spanned the 20th century and part of the 21st century. And she had every prime minister. Her first prime minister was Winston Churchill. Her last was Liz Truss. And I think there was something like 11 in between. And so she'll always be in history books because she was the great backdrop. And in her reign, there was the Men on the Moon, and there were the Beatles, and there were these extraordinary things happening, and she was always there. So I think she'll always be talked about, but I don't think she'll be talked about as a great kind of character.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. She was the backdrop to basically a completely changed era from, the technologification of everything to where we are today. That's a very interesting point. Well, we really do have to wrap it up there, unfortunately. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. I'm not sure how comfortable you are blowing wind in your own sails, but why do you think your book has been received so popularly?
I think, I hope it appeals to people who weren't. It used to be that royal books would be just read by royal fans. And I think I step back and I make it, it should be of interest to everyone, just because it's not a sort of royal fans book, and it's not obsequious.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's not sort of unnecessarily nasty or anything. And so I think I do lots of stuff which normal royal writers don't, things like the Phil Collins story, or there are lots of areas I go into all the different poet laureates and how they treated her or how she treated them. And there are areas that other people don't go into. So I suppose that's right. Sorry, I have been blowing air into my sails.
Well, I've now discovered the answer to that question. You're perfectly comfortable with it. So that's fine. No, but it sounds absolutely brilliant, Craig. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. The book is called A Voyage Around the Queen, and it's by Craig Brown. You can find it on Amazon or the Talk Radio Europe bookshop. Bye, Craig. Thank you.
Bye. Nice to speak to you.